All right, Studcast fans, it is time once again for Southeastern Rewind's Tell Me More. I'm David Summers with the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller, answering 5 questions from the latest Studcast, now on Ron's new home on YouTube. The 5 questions on this edition of Tell Me More come from the Studcast episode number 006. That is the 6th ever episode of a Studcast, which is now counting over 200 and still going. Remember to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind. It's all about our man, the Tennessee stud, Ron Fuller. Ron, what's going on, my man?
Oh, man, I'm happy, dude. Geez. Got a little rainstorm this afternoon, and it's time to tell the tales, man. Answer the questions, and I really enjoy it. Have a good time, and I can't wait to see what you got laid out for me today, man. So,
hey, I'm ready to get it going. And listen, you can never say I'm the one throwing softballs because these are not softballs typically, and they're coming from your Studcast listeners. You want to get started? I'm ready if you are.
Heck yeah, man. Let's do her.
All right, let's get her going. Jay Pitts in Yukon, Oklahoma asked, you said that most wrestlers know when it's time to go or to move on. Was there ever an instance where you had to tell a wrestler that it's time for you to go? Either because their gimmick had run its course or for their lifestyle choices or something, maybe something different, but that's how Jay Pitt set it up.
Well, and that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of fans want to know how the heck wrestlers come and go, and how was all that handled. So let's get right down to it, man. Most of the time in my wrestling companies, the only problem I seemed to have, man, about moving talent out was the fact that none of them wanted to leave. Usually they were all making good money, and they were crazy about the short trips they were driving on, and that combination was hard to find in most territories. Big territories were big, and that meant the cities were far apart, and you were going to spend 2,000-3,000 miles a week on the road, and in my territory you were going to spend 500 miles a week on the road. So it was a place that the guys wanted to stay. So that being the case, obviously, we had to give guys what was referred to as a notice or a finishing date. And that's basically the date on which they were no longer going to be employed by the company. That was usually anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how good the guy was and how long it might take him to find a job somewhere else. So, if you had a great talent, you gave him a 2-week notice because he's going to get himself a job real quick. And if you had a young guy that's just getting started, he might need a longer notice to give him more opportunity to find him a place to go. But the way it was handled wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just the proper way to move talent in and out of territories. They all did it that way. So all full-time wrestlers, they made their living doing the wrestling every day. They were used to this process. And it was never meant to convey the fact to them that they were doing something wrong when you gave a guy a notice. It's just that the booker had decided that their run was over for now, that you had done everything with them you could, and you just needed to move them on. And, guys didn't get real upset, but as a booker, I never liked the job of giving guys notices. I didn't like to have to go and tell them, you got to leave, I've had you here long enough.
Right.
But I did it most of the time when I first started booking. I didn't have any choice.
Yeah.
But later on, as I began to have co-bookers, me and Rob were co-booking together in the 70s. Me and Bob Armstrong were co-booking together in the 1980s. Well, guess what, Dave? I gave them the job of giving the notices.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
I said, you got to tell so-and-so over there that he's got a 2-week notice.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't like it.
Welcome to the big time, boys.
Like it,
yeah. Yeah.
the reason I didn't like it is because every time I had gave a notice, I'd get to see these sad faces. They didn't want to leave, right?
Right.
But that was a good thing in a way because it meant that they were happy while they were there. They had been making money, and they were kind of sad to have to leave. So it meant you were doing something right in your operation of the wrestling business if you had guys that were sad when you gave them a notice. So and then now he asked a question here, Jay, I think his name was, about what about when you have a lifestyle choice? So do you have to give somebody a notice for a reason other than the fact it's just basically it's time to go?
Hmm.
So, and I really only, when I think back, I only remember one instance which I personally had to tell a wrestler he needed to go because of his lifestyle choice,
Huh.
of something he was doing wrong. And that guy was Big Bad John in southeastern Knoxville. And I think it was probably in early 1976 that it happened. And I'd only been an owner and a booker for, around 2 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And John had a little problem with drinking. And he drank. The problem was he drinking at the wrong times. Instead of drinking at night when everything was over, he would sometimes show up at the match and he'd already had a drink or two, or he'd come to TV and I could smell it on his breath.
Oh.
And I discussed it with him several times. Said, John, that ain't going to work. You got to do it. I don't care what you do after you finish with work, but I don't want you to come here in that form or fashion. So, and he could have been, he's a pretty wild dude, big
Mm-hmm.
old guy about my height, weighed about 320 pounds, and he could have been doing something other than just drinking. I don't know that.
Hmm.
But, he might have been because there were some wrestlers that were known to do that.
Hmm.
I personally liked him a lot. He was a great guy, and I was in Australia with him. So, he was extremely talented, especially as a manager, maybe more so than in the ring. And I had him managing Ronnie Garvin in 1976. And, Ronnie hadn't learned to do his own interviews. So
Yeah.
I got him a mouthpiece, and that was Big Bad John.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it was another reason I began to hate to give notices to wrestlers. Having to let John go for a reason like that, it really bothered me. He was a friend of mine, and I just hated to do it. Luckily I did talk to him about it on many times and ask him if he could start to control it. They wouldn't have a problem, but he never could. So giving that notice really bothered me. But after that, I always had my assistant booker handle those jobs, that's probably a pretty sorry way to get around having to do it. But the only other awkward situation I can remember that's anywhere similar to this didn't happen to me, but it happened more to my brother with Southeastern Pensacola. This happened in the early 1980s. And my brother and I switched bookers every other year. And Rob was booking in the year 1980, and we had two great young stars. One of them's going to go on to become a Hall of Famer,
Mm-hmm.
Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they were working for us in Pensacola. And I don't know a lot about this problem because it was my year off as a booker, and Rob was handling everything that year. And it involved Shawn Michaels. He was the guy that Rob let go. He had to give him a notice, and he talked to me about it. And I said, "Yeah, we got to do it," And he was partners with Marty Jannetty, and I think this had something to do with Shawn Michaels signing the young girl's jacket. And instead of just signing his name on there, he put something he shouldn't have. Wrote something on there that was inappropriate.
Wrote it on her jacket?
On her jacket.
Wow.
Right? And I mean, when that happens, their mama sees it, and somehow their mom got back and came to the dressing room area and said, I need to talk to somebody that's in charge. And she showed the jacket to Rob. And he was like, oh, my gosh. And so what do you do?
Yeah.
And I'm sure Shawn regretted it. He was very young. He was just getting started, and both those guys were headed for stardom, especially
Yeah.
Sean.
Yeah, no
So I
doubt.
never got to know either one of those guys because I wasn't booking at that time, you know. But boy, years later, man, when I watched Shawn Michaels' work in his latter years, he was certainly a talented dude. I mean, wow, what a tremendous worker he was. He could have matches with anybody from the Undertaker, as big as the Undertaker, down to guys that were his size, monster guys and small guys. He became a great talent, but yeah, Jay, answer to your question, there were times that you did have to give guys a notice for something they did wrong. Uh,
Mm.
and if you handled your business properly and guys saw how everybody else acted when they came into your territory, we didn't have much problem because we really had everybody knew what they were supposed to do, and we didn't have very many wild dudes.
Yeah. All right. In this case, this sounded like something that you couldn't just let it go. In some cases, when you got some extremely talented people, sometimes you let some things slide. So, how talented was he at that point?
He was talented. I mean, both those boys were really talented. You could tell they were headed to stardom. There was no doubt about that. But they weren't on top. They were in
Right.
the second match, and they weren't in the sixth match.
Right.
Had they been in the sixth match, you might have been, like you say, a little more lenient. Man,
Yeah.
you don't want to let a big star go because he
Right.
made a little small mistake. So sometimes too, I think Dave, just like in every other business, making an example out of one guy keeps it from happening on a regular basis after that.
Yeah, and you also chalk it in Shawn Michaels' case. I'm surely chalks it up to, well, you live and you learn, and obviously he did. So he came out on the right end, and that's amazing. That there you go, a couple of athletes that came through the system where you were. All right, so David in Norwalk, California, wants to know: did Mr. Wright ever use his chisel in USA Wrestling when he was a manager?
He must be talking about Ron Wright.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, if he's
Yeah.
talking chisel,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
only one man he can be talking about, right?
Right.
He calls him Mr. Wright. So, wow, I love Ron Wright chisels. Heck, I'll talk chisel all night long, man. Ron Wright's chisel was probably one of the most talked about and insane tools ever used to get blood in a match that I ever saw. I mean, and the first time I ever saw it, he came to Florida in 1972 on vacation with his brother Don, who he called Donnie, and they worked in Florida for 2 weeks on vacation. It was winter time, and they wanted to get out of Tennessee. Like a lot of guys came through Florida in the winter time. There's a lot of them great talent, actually. So that was the first time I ever saw his chisel. And he sat in the dressing room every night in that 2 weeks he was there, and he filed his chisel with a little emery board. It's so, and he'd cross his legs and sit there very nonchalantly, and he'd take out this horrible looking tool that he busted people's heads open with, and he filed to sharpen them up, man, because
Yeah.
he was going to use it sooner or later. So let me just to kind of describe a chisel, what this thing looked like. It was a metal plate. It is a steel metal plate. It was about 3 inches wide and about the width of your hand when you closed your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And on the plate, he welded, or somebody welded. I'm sure he didn't do it, but on that little plate there, he welded a 1 inch long little triangular piece of steel with the sharp edge facing up.
Hmm.
Right?
Right.
So if you can kind of picture that,
Yep.
and then he took white tape and he wrapped it around the large metal part of the plate where the chisel went onto his hand, and that kind of simulated brass knucks. It gave it like a little bit of a brass knucks look, when he put that on his hand.
Yeah. Okay.
So every guy in the territory he made sure they all got a good look at it, and he was proud of it. And every night he brought it out of his bag, and he showed it to anybody that wanted to see it, and then he kept spouting off every night. He says, Ron Wright style says, before I leave here, somebody's gonna get hit with my chisel. So he so he brings this horrible tool with him to Florida, and he's determined to hit somebody with it before he leaves the state. So, and he promises it's going to happen.
Right.
So, and Ron Wright was enough of a character in himself, but when he says crazy things like this, and the way he looked and the way he talked, we were all like, what is this guy all about, man? Like, I've never seen a dude like this. So
this had to be the strangest thing in Florida wrestling history. Oh,
I mean, he was one of the strangest guys that ever come to Florida. There ain't no doubt about that. His brother had a little more class, I'd say, than Ron, but Ron was just get down dirty, by golly.
Oh, right.
So everybody had a good look at his game, had his chisel, and they all heard him say he's going to hit somebody with it. So finally, on his last night in the Florida territory, in a little city called Lakeland, which is about 40 miles east of Tampa, about halfway on the way to Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
And that night there was a battle royal, and it was the last thing on the card of the evening. And so Ron Wright had his chisel out, and everybody had kind of forgot about, he said he's going to hit somebody with it, and he kept telling guys that night. I didn't pay any attention, but he told me, he says, this is my last night, and I guess that was a little reminder that somebody's going to get it. So anyway, he gets in the ring for the battle royal. And he finds the youngest kid in the ring. It's a young guy named Joe Flaherty. And he ties him in the ropes. And then he reaches down in his tights. And about the time he reaches in his tights, and everybody stops. Almost the battle royal just stops. And we're all like, oh, what is he going to do? And he pulls out the chisel, right? And he takes his time and he puts it on his hand. The people in the crowd, they got no idea what's going on. They're like wondering. I'm sure they're wondering, well, what the hell did they all quit fighting in there for?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, everybody wanted to see him hit this kid with the chisel, right?
Yeah.
So he gets the chisel on his hand, and then Joe Flaherty's in the ropes, and he sees him put the chisel on his hand. And he starts screaming like a little baby, man. And he's trying to get out of the ropes. Literally, he's trapped, right? And old Ron goes over, man. He snatches him with the side headlock, man. he rears back, boy, with that chisel, and he gives him a taste of it, man. He hit him with that thing, Dave. Bloodshot all the way across the ring. I was like, gosh, almighty, man. So after looking at what happened, I think all of us kind of experienced the chisel that night.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of these guys was in the ring, man. I think he was the next guy to get thrown out, though. Nobody else wanted to get it. I think everybody went for Ron Wright. Get him out of here, man. So, and when this was all over, I never thought I'd ever see these two guys again. I'm a young guy, and I've been in Florida for 2 years, and there, lo and behold, 2 years later, I end up buying Knoxville. I end up in the home, their territory's home.
and
I'm
he's
going to deal with these guys on a nightly basis.
And he's a freaking
career.
Yeah, and he's a fan favorite now. So yeah.
Oh, they loved him, man.
Yeah,
He was always a heel until I came there and I turned him babyface.
Right.
Because I wanted to be a heel, and so and that means I'm gonna have to wrestle against him a lot.
Right.
So pretty quickly we get into a big feud. Lasted probably 3 months. And, rather than, him being the heel like he was always accustomed to, now he's a baby face. But he still put the chisel in his tights. every night. He would threaten in the dressing room, Ron, I'm going to hit you tonight with my chisel. And, I said, no, you're not, Ron. you know, anyway, he would put it in his tights. So sometimes, in the middle of toward the end of the match, he'd reach in his tights and he'd take it out. He's serious. He put it on his hand. He's going to use it, right?
Oh God.
And I would get nasty with him. I would knock him on his butt, and I'd take his chisel off and I'd hit him with it. I must have done that 6 or 8 times. I mean, and he didn't seem to care. He never really got mad about it. He's all bloody as heck, and and I was like, well, maybe he'll learn, that he ain't going to hit me, and I'm going to hit him. So finally, one night, we're wrestling in the Knoxville Coliseum. First time we'd ever been in the Coliseum in the history of wrestling in Knoxville. The first time any wrestling had ever gone to the Coliseum, and I'm wrestling him in the main event, and I told him before probably 2 days before the match, I said, Ron, you're going to get your fun Friday night. I said, you're going to get to hit me with your chisel. Oh, he lit up, man. Big smile. Oh, Ron, you serious?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
Here's the deal, man. So I knew all day Friday I was going to the hospital that night. Right?
Wow.
There ain't no doubt about it. And I guess honestly, I was probably due it. I smacked him with it 6 or 8 times, and sure enough, man, the end of the match, he came out with his chisel, and boy, he got me. And then I still got the scar from that chisel shot. 13 stitches it took to sew it up, man. In the hospital till late in the morning, getting it sewed up, John.
How did he control it, or could it be controlled, as far as the depth that he might stick you?
Oh, he was pretty good with it. He'd used it so many times. I was the one that was really bad because I couldn't control it. I didn't know how hard to hit somebody.
Oh, okay.
So, he was the one that was going to the hospital and getting stitches a lot more than I was. Every time I hit him, he was down there getting sewed up.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to control it. But he didn't. I knew he was going to hit me hard enough that I was going to go hospital. I knew I was going to.
And again, you got how many stitches?
13
wow.
stitches.
Okay.
13 stitches, and I still got the scar there.
That was your
when
badge
I see
of
that
honor.
Scar, I think Ron Wright. Every time
that's
I see it.
Your Ron Wright badge of honor. There it is.
So so let's answer. David's in California. There's question. Did Ron Wright ever use his chisel in USA wrestling when he was a manager there? Now this is 1975 when he hit me with the chisel. I don't have USA wrestling put together until 1988. We're talking about 13 years later.
Yeah.
Ron at this point is now managing rather than wrestling, and he's managing the Mongolian Stomper, Moondog Rex, and a guy called the German Stormtrooper. And and on TV, the very last show, USA wrestling show that we did before I sold my company, Ron Wright is going to use the chisel the only time ever on USA wrestling. Okay, so the Mongolian Stomper is in a match with a 17-year-old young talented kid named Todd Morton, kind of like a younger relative of Ricky Morton, the big time star. This kid, we call him Todd Morton. He had the blonde hair. He looked a little like Ricky. And he's wrestling against a Mongolian Stomper, which is basically a huge handicap match for the poor kid anyway. Gordon Soley was the show's commentator, and I was the host every week with him. I'd never wrestled for the 26 weeks that these shows were being done. So the Stomper, during the course of the match, and I wasn't aware it was going to happen. Nobody asked me about it. But the Stomper threw the kid out on the floor, and he kind of drew the referee away from where the kid went out, and Ron Wright standing there. and Ron Wright reaches in his pants, and I go, "Oh no, no, man!" And out comes the chisel, and the Knoxville, and there was a big studio. It was in the Knoxville Coliseum ballroom where we were taping the program. It was
Mm-hmm.
probably 300 people, big for a studio crowd.
Yeah.
And as soon as he put the chisel on his hand, the whole crowd kind of went, "Oh," like, "Oh my God, I know what that is," right? So they all saw it coming. But Gordon
Yeah.
Soley sitting next to me, he'd never seen the chisel. He had no idea what's about to happen.
Right.
So he starts describing it. He goes, "Oh, looks like Ron Wright's put something on his hand there, you know." And then Ron grabs the kid, man, by the headlock, and he hits him with that. And my gosh almighty, oh, it looked like the same guy in Lakeland, the same deal. The blood went. The kid standing on the floor looking into the ring, and the blood went all the way to the far side of the ring.
Wow.
It was like, oh man. And Gordon was never speechless. I don't care whatever happened in a wrestling match. Gordon always could comment instantly. And when he popped him with that, and Gordon saw that blood shoot across the ring, for the first time in 18 years I knew Gordon, he didn't say anything. He was speechless. And then he finally, once he saw how bad the kid was bleeding, he finally screamed on the air. He goes, "Oh my God." I'm like,
Oh, wow.
I guess so, Gordon. So there was so much blood that for the first time ever in all the years I produced wrestling shows,
Mm-hmm.
when they went back to get ready to air it, they blurred out the kid's face every time his face was shown because it was so bloody from
Wow.
that chisel shot.
Wow.
And it turned out to be one of the wildest TV matches that I was ever in or ever saw. Before it was over, I'd been the commentator for 26 weeks and not ever been in the ring or anything else. And I actually left the set and hit the ring, and everybody was in there. Gosh, it was 4 or 5 heels on me, and I'm trying to fight for the kid. So I come back, I wrestled a Stomper the next show. We sold out the Knoxville Coliseum on the last show that USA ever held in the Coliseum. Totally sold it out. And when I look back on this, I bet Todd Morton, 33 years after all this, he has a scar on his head, kind of like the one I have, from the chisel, I'm sure.
Right.
And I bet he tells the story, and I bet he's very proud of it, and he got to show everybody where Ron Wright hit him.
Yeah. You've got the badge of honor, and so does Todd. So there you go. 33 years later. That's a good one. All right. So as we keep moving, this question, Stud, let's set this up by saying it's a correction from the last Tell Me More episode. The question credited to Lionel Lawson on the last episode was not his question. Somehow it got mixed up, and we ended up firing several folks over this. So anyway, heads roll when it's Dave and the Stud.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we have a research team, and somebody made the mistake of
Yeah.
putting the wrong name on the question.
Yeah.
And, I apologize, too, for it having happened. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to put the right question under Mr. Lionel Lawson's name today. We'll make up for it, right?
Yeah, we'll fix that because we don't play. Ron and I quit. We quit school because of recess. We don't play. All right, so we'll fix it like this. The question was, Lionel had seen a black and white YouTube video of a wrestler named Ricky Starr. His gimmick was that of a ballet dancer. His question was, did Ricky Starr ever work for the Welch family? Listen, this doesn't sound familiar to me.
No, we didn't discuss this. That's for sure, and this one I have never seen. I know a little bit about Ricky Starr, but Ricky Starr is way back. We're talking about a guy that probably was wrestling in the 40s and 50s. So if he worked for anybody, it probably been for Roy. So the answer to that question basically is no. Ricky Starr never worked for my family, certainly not on a regular basis. And he might have worked one shot, maybe made appearance somewhere for Roy back in Roy's days, but he's never been a regular contributor to our family's business. That's for sure. So, but asking some of my other family members, I bet he was a trained ballet guy, and I think I remember hearing that this guy was a pretty darn good amateur wrestler, and that he even had some boxing skills.
Wow.
And I think he was popular enough that back in the 1950s, he even sold out Madison Square Garden on a couple of occasions. Now, I don't know if he danced around the ring or
Wait.
what his style was, but that's pretty impressive.
He sold out MSG. Wait, with dancing or wrestling or both or what?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't see this video, so I've never seen Ricky Starr do his thing.
Yeah.
But I do know that he ended up going to the United Kingdom, going over in England in the early 60s, and he became a star over in England in the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Okay.
But I'm gonna tie this into somebody that I do know. By golly, this Ricky Starr passed away in September of 2014, and his ring persona might have just been picked up by another dude that was big time in Continental. And you probably got an idea who I'm talking about, Adrian Street.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a feeling that Ricky Starr went over there and turned Adrian Street into Adrian Street.
Probably
right?
so.
Or a Goldust type of character.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So the next time I talk to Adrian, I'm going to have to ask him if Ricky Starr had any effect on him, man. And did he play some part in producing that character that turned out to be Adrian Street that came to the United States 20 years after Ricky Starr? So, and then Ricky's real life manager was a guy named Jack Pfefer, who was a wrestling promoter, and he must have gone with him to the UK, or before he went to the UK. He had Jack Pfefer as his manager.
All right, that's interesting because this answer leads us to question number 4. Ron Jerry in Houma, Louisiana sent this one in. He said, "We've heard you talk about your dad being a world champion for Jack Pfefer, and even Jim Cornette tells a few Jack Pfefer stories about how Miss Jared wanted to kill Jack Pfefer. What insight or history can you give us on Jack Pfefer? And by the way, on a side note, you said your father wrestled for Jack under the name George Valentine. I was wondering if the name was derived from a very popular radio show detective from the early 50s named George Valentine."
Good gosh, man. Wow.
Did you hear the computer ticking?
Ricky Starr into Jack Pfefer. I mean, so Jack Pfefer is a character. He is one of wrestling's true characters, and I know a little bit about Jack Pfefer. Now, this George Valentine and the show detective from the early 50s on radio, that's beyond my days. I know I'm not a young guy, but I'm not that old, by golly. So I don't know much about George Valentine and why my dad must have taken that name. Jack Pfefer must have given it to him, and it may be because there was a really popular show detective in the early 50s named George Valentine. Anyway, let's break down Jack Pfefer. That's the best I can do here for this gentleman. Here's what I do know about Jack Pfefer. Jack Pfefer was a very imaginative person. Wow, he was out there, and he was a controversial promoter. He never wrestled, but he actually began his stuff way back in the 1920s. So he was old by 1950. So he must have been extremely difficult to work with. And he had all kinds of problems with promoters from all across the country because he wanted to jump into their territories and try to run against them. So in the 1930s, he was one of the first to convince sports writers in the business that he got pissed off about the way he was being treated by other wrestlers and and by other promoters. And he went to the newspapers, the big newspapers in the Northeast, and he told them that wrestling ain't all it's supposed to be, basically, right? Then he went and got himself a wrestler to manage, other than this star we just talked about, called the French Angel, who was a big, huge star, ugly, ugly guy. I mean, he was just horrible looking.
Wow.
So, so that's further proof, obviously, that he considered the wrestling business to be, theatrical almost. And, he was promoting wrestling shows almost in a Broadway style of show. Probably Ricky Starr was working for him. I would not doubt. He's a ballet dancer. So, he came in the 40s and 50s, and he attacked, like he did a lot of other territories, Roy's territory in Nashville. He came right into Nashville and started trying to run matches in Tennessee. Well, that was a mistake for Jack, because Jack wasn't messing with a ballet dancer when he got to messing with Roy. So, Jack didn't stay long in Tennessee. I guess that's the end of the story. I don't think, I know Jack didn't get any bookings. I don't know about Ricky Starr, but I know darn well Jack Pfefer never got a booking from Roy. And, my father worked with Jack Pfefer many times. He went to Chicago and worked for him as Jack Pfeffer's world heavyweight champion on many occasions. And, Pfefer just had tremendous heat with all kinds of promoters all across the country. And his entire life was a battle to keep from getting killed, probably by some wrestlers. And no wonder Christine Jarrett said she'd like to kill him. So would a lot of other promoters like to have killed him.
Okay. All right. So as I glance ahead, something is weird here. Walk Smith from Melbourne, Australia, wants to know, and how many weeks in a row has he been on the show? All right, so
all of them, ain't he?
I think so. All right, so
all right, okay. Well, let's hear what he's got going on this week.
He says, Lilly, we're talking about his dog. Lilly sends her love and said something about you still not answering her proposition. Your family had all right.
Go ahead.
Your family had a long history with Mario Galento. What did your father, your grandfather, or you think of Mario going on live radio in Memphis in 1974 and exposing the business?
Wow. Yeah, there again, man, here he comes with another great question. But first of all, Walk, I'm not going to have a personal relationship with your little dog, Lilly. I mean,
well,
I love dogs.
Seems like you already do, Stud, but go ahead. Anyway.
Oh, no, Dave. Don't go there, man. I love dogs, and she's pretty. She's a pretty little dog. I've seen pictures of
indeed.
her,
Yep.
and I'd be glad to pat her on the head, maybe rub her down the back one time, but I'm definitely not going to let her lick my face or anything like that, Walk, So there's going to be nothing that personal about it, and I know that's kind of what the proposition was, something about, she wanted to get very close to me or whatever.
Yeah.
So, listen to me, Dave. Just listen to me. I'm talking about kissing his dog here. I'm getting as far out as the Aussie.
We're not asking any questions at all. Go right ahead, Stud. Go ahead.
Oh man, I don't know. Of course, Lilly the dog didn't really say anything to me last week, and she certainly can't write questions. So all that comes from that crazy dude from down under. And look, he's got me talking about his dog on a weekly basis.
I was not going to point that out again, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, come on now, ease up, Dave. Speaking of down under, he ain't going to take me down under in a spell or anything. He ain't going to change me about the way I feel about dogs. So okay, Walk. I'm going to continue to answer your questions for you, but not your dog. Not your dog, only because, and I'm only going to answer your questions at this point, because darn it, I got to say, Walk, your questions are great. So, Lilly ain't going to lick me, and I'm not going to kiss her. So let's keep this as a business only thing between me and you,
We're
Watkin.
yeah.
And I'm just going to answer your questions.
Again, we're not going to ask any questions at all about that. That'll be between you and Lilly. And anyway, hope you work that out. And Godspeed, John Glenn. Okay, where was I? And so it sounds like there's more to this than you're willing to admit, Ron. But anyway, so what's up between? It's just you and me, Ron. What's up between you and the dog, Lilly?
All right, Dave. Something, Dave. Walk, he's thousands of miles away down there in Australia.
Yeah.
He's hard to get to.
Yeah.
But you're only a few hundred miles from
look, we're 6 hours at least, so give me a head start.
So you're not far enough away to be playing this game, man. So let's let's just leave Lilly alone.
Okay? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm out. I promise. All right. So
what was the question again?
Your family had a long history, and listen, anybody who's been around wrestling knows this name, Mario Galento. What did your grandfather, your father, or you? What did you guys think of Mario going on live radio in Memphis in 1974 and exposing the business?
All right. Okay. So let's get to Mario Galento here. You know what Mario Galento's name actually was? Mm-mm. I'm sure you don't, Dave.
No.
Probably nobody out there knows
idea.
This. His actual name was Bonnie Lee Boyette.
What?
That's it. And then they called him Butch. They had to do something to make it Butch.
Wow.
But Bonnie Lee Boyette was his actual name. And he was probably one of the most unusual people that was ever drawn to be a professional wrestler. I mean, he was never very popular with the wrestlers, with the boys. Boys didn't like him. He was very difficult to do business with if you were a promoter. The promoters didn't like him. And the fans absolutely feared him. He just scared them to death. He had a little aura about him, man. Charisma, kind of a little charisma that just drew people. They wanted to see him, but they were scared of him, and it kind of set him apart from other wrestlers. He wasn't a big guy. He was about 6'2", 190 pounds. He had long black hair in the 50s, long before that was the style.
Yeah.
But he was always in this tremendous shape. He made fantastic interviews, and he was an extremely believable worker in the ring. He was a great heel, so great that this guy may have caused more riots than any wrestler in the history of the sport.
Really? Wow.
I mean, people just wanted to kill him, but they wanted to have his back turned before they tried. They didn't want to kill him face looking at him, right?
Yeah.
So he was so different. He got picked up by Hollywood, and in the 1950s, he starred in 2 movies. One called The Natchez Trace, and another called The Frontier Woman. Maybe that's because of that Bonnie name he had, The Frontier Woman. I don't know.
Right.
But both of these movies are owned by Turner Broadcasting today. They're still available. If people want to go and look at them, you get a look at Mario Galento as an actor.
Wow.
So his relationship with my grandfather Roy, I sadly know very little bit about it because of my age, and I wasn't around that much. But he and my father were responsible for 2 of the largest crowds ever drawn in the southern United States. One of them in 1958, Mobile, Alabama, Ladd Memorial Stadium, 40,000 people.
Whoa.
And another one in 1965 in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Ponce de Leon Baseball Stadium, 30,000.
Wow.
The unbelievable numbers. Wow. And, and my dad, and people may have seen that picture of him, man, after one of that 58 match with both his eyes black and all this open wounds. He didn't stitch up his face a lot of times when he got cut and got these hard ways. And, it's one of the nastiest looking pictures. I ran it pretty not too long ago on my social media site. Somebody had sent it around, and I jumped on it and said, I want people to see this. This is what my daddy did to him, right? And Wow, it's pretty remarkable. My dad told me that he said, Ron, this guy is totally immune to pain. When I was a kid, he goes, I said, why is it that he don't nothing seems to hurt him? And he said, I don't think he feels pain, and so that meant, and so Dad, I asked Dad, I said, well, how do you know that he was really immune to pain? And he said, well, he said back in the day, he said, I used to pay $25 for a hard way. If you let a guy hit you in the face and as hard as he could,
Mhm.
back of your eye or bust you open, he said, I paid the guys 25 extra. So
Wow.
hey, you got the picture here, Dave.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you stand there and just let a guy blast you, man, with his best
Wow.
shot, hoping that you're going to bleed or your eye's going to get black.
Yeah.
And so that meant, that if a guy busted you like that, then and you bled, or you end up 2 days later with a big old black eye, Dad hand you $25. So Dad said
Yeah.
most wrestlers never collected anything. Most guys didn't want to go that route.
Huh.
And then he said some wrestlers might every once in a while collect $25 in a month's time. They'd get busted once in the month and pick up $25.
But
Uh,
that
you know,
in that
yeah, once
yeah.
a month.
Yeah,
And then he
and
said one week. I said, well, what was Galento's deal? And he said 1 week. In 1 week, I paid him $125
good
for
God.
hard ways.
Wow.
Which meant 5 out of 6 nights that he worked, he busted his eyes or he blacked his eyes. I mean, gosh almighty, what kind of commitment is that to the sport, man? I mean, geez, that's nobody. How does anybody do that?
But
So
$25 back in 1958, that was a lot of money. But
yeah,
and
it
then
was a lot of money. It's probably equal to 150 or maybe $200 now. And
yeah,
nowadays, but and if you've got 5 of those a week, yeah, that's
yeah,
like getting an extra grand for a week. And
yeah, yeah.
you would think somebody would consider it, but Dad didn't have a whole lot of takers, man, for the hard way deal.
Right.
But
Wow.
so I'm not. I want to drop back and let's talk about this match in the baseball stadium in Atlanta in 1965 between Dad and Mario Galento, and the referee for that match was the undefeated world boxing champion Rocky Marciano. They had 30,000 people. I sold tickets for that event, and it was just awesome, man. They stopped traffic for miles in Atlanta, people trying to get there. So at this point, we lived on a farm in Griffin, Georgia, and it was about 30 miles south of Atlanta, and we had some horses on the farm, and Dad talked a lot on TV about riding horses all the time. He was on the Georgia Championship Wrestling TV show. This was back in the 1960s, and I'll never forget the interview that Mario Galento made about Dad's horses and his farm, right? About 2 weeks before this big match in
Hmm.
which they're going to just beat each other to pieces again like they did the first time in Mobile. And Galento got on TV and he said, he said, riding horses is a tremendous exercise for the horse. He said, it don't do nothing for the rider. This is his interview. I'll never forget it. And he says, Buddy Fuller, he goes, I can run from Atlanta, where my house is, 30 miles to Griffin, Georgia, and kick your ass and run back to Atlanta.
Oh my God.
I remember watching the interview and thinking, whoa, damn, wow, this don't sound good. So, I know this seemed like it probably doesn't have anything to do with the answer you Walk's question yet, but I'm going to get there. I just want people to understand Mario Galento, what he's all about. So Walk basically asked, what did my grandfather, my father, and I think about Galento exposed in the business on radio in Memphis, 1974.
Right.
And I think, and I'm sure both of them would agree if they were still alive today, that it was horrible anytime somebody involved in wrestling back in those days did something like that.
Hmm.
Didn't hardly ever happen. It
Hmm.
was very, very unusual. But there were always two sides to every story. And I like sometimes to look at the other side of the story, or at least consider it. So I consider the point that Mario, at this point in his life in '74, is an older wrestler, and he probably, like most wrestlers, didn't save his money, and he needed money, and he in a match or two a week would have helped him survive. And I know that Jerry Jarrett and my grandfather were running Memphis at that point, and they had a lot of young talent. Jerry Lawler and Dundee, and they had great talent in there, and they really didn't need an old guy like Mario. So they didn't use him. They refused to book him in probably the city in which he was a great star, and he was in Memphis too. He drew a big, huge crowd there in Memphis too. So Mario was probably hungry, and he was desperate, and desperate people do sometimes desperate things.
Yeah.
And I look back at just what I said about these hard ways and about the what he gave to the wrestling business, and I kind of think he paid his dues in a lot of ways, far beyond what most wrestlers are capable of. Hard ways one time is a big thing. Hard ways 5 times in a week is just it's off the charts.
Wow.
I mean, so I probably think he went to that radio station basically to kind of get even for them not using him and them pushing him away from the business that basically he had given so much to,
Yeah.
And he did the only thing maybe he could do, and then it was kind of in desperation. So, Dave, when I really think about this Mario mistake, I'm pretty sure he probably regretted it the rest of his life, and but when you think about it, it was only heard his expose was only heard on one little radio station in one city, and it was only heard by those people that happened to be listening to that station at the time.
Right.
And his mistake didn't hurt Memphis at all as a wrestling city. They just kept right on drawing like he never went on there. So it was basically nothing to compared to. Wow, I sit here and I think back at something far worse. If you compared what Mario did to what the son of a great promoter and the guy that was the president owner of the largest wrestling company in the world, I'm not going to say who it was, did. And what he did for a lot less reason than what Mario did. So I am going to say it. Vince McMahon Jr. basically did what Mario did. But instead of doing it on a tiny radio station, he did it in front of the world. And he told everybody that wrestling wasn't real. And he'd already killed the territories when he did it. And so he basically killed his own business when he did it that time, when he went out and just told everybody. And he's left us all, and wrestling too, where it is today. So with the popularity of the sport being far less than half of what it was during Mario's time, that blame goes back to McMahon. So I got a question for everybody to end this show. My question for everyone listening out there is, how does Mario's mistake rank with Vince McMahon Jr.'s?
Wow, and I think that question sums it up so amazingly. There it is, another Southeastern Rewinds Tell Me More, where the stud, Ron Fuller, answered 5 questions about Studcast number 6, the original ever Studcast, which is now on Ron's new home on YouTube. And please remember to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube, subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube on Ron's new home. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind as well. For Ron Fuller, I'm David Summers, and we'll be back soon with another Tell Me More.